The regular meeting of the Capital Long Range Committee, Improvements Committee is beginning. Good afternoon. My name is Jeffrey Strand. I'm the chair of the Capital Long Range Improvement Committee, or CLIC. Before we begin, I'd like to note that this meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota statute, section 13D.021, due to the declared local health pandemic. I will now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so we may verify the presence of a quorum. It is 12:04 p.m. on June 30th, 2021.
Okay, so Thorbjorn Adam.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Here we go.
Thorbjorn Adam. Zachariah Aiden.
Present.
Josh Beard.
Present.
John Bernstein.
Here.
Steve Brandt. James Brown.
Here.
Luke Cunningham.
Here.
Scott Engel.
Here.
Amity Foster.
Here.
Eamon Gallagher.
Here.
Bill Groves.
Here.
Ty Goodnestead. William Gullickson. Risa Hustad. Katie Jones.
Here.
Matt Kazinka.
Here.
Richard LaRoe.
Here.
Erica Mauter.
Here.
Dan McConnell. Jake McCormick.
Here.
Dan Miller.
Here.
George Montague.
Here.
Beth Soso.
Here.
Matt Human.
Here.
Katrina Stratton.
Here.
Eric Wan.
Here.
Vice Chair Willie Bridges. Chair Jeff Strand.
Present.
So we got a couple hands up. Steve Brandt, I noticed your hand was up. I believe Jonathan On is also in queue.
I just wanted to clarify, I think I answered during the roll call during Luke's slot. I'm here. I don't know if Luke is here. I just wanted to clarify that.
I am also here. Thanks, Steve.
Jonathan?
Yeah, it's a little difficult to hear the clerk, so I think I missed the roll call. Jonathan On's online.
With that, there's 23 members present.
Very good. We have a quorum. If the members have completed their question, they can lower their digital hands. Then the next item, I would ask members to consolidate adoption of the agenda, as well as approval of the minutes of the June 23rd, 2021 meeting. And will the maker of the motion indicate your name and the seconder do likewise? So is there a motion to adopt the agenda and approve the minutes?
So moved, Eric Water.
Is there a second?
Second. Amity.
Do we have any questions, comments, discussion? Seeing none, the clerk will call the roll on the consolidated motion.
Thorbjorn Adam. Zachariah Aiden. Jonathan On.
Here, aye.
Jocelyn Beard.
Aye.
John Bernstein.
Aye.
Steve Brandt.
Aye.
James Brown. James Brown. Luke Cunningham.
Aye.
Scott Engel.
Aye.
Amity Foster.
Aye.
Eamon Gallagher.
Aye.
Bill Graves.
Aye.
Kai Goodmestad. Kai Goodmestad. William Gullickson. William Gullickson. Risa Hustad.
Aye.
Katie Jones.
Aye.
Matt Kazinka.
Aye.
Hilda Rowe.
Aye.
Erica Mauter.
Aye.
Dan McConnell. Ann McConnell. Jake McCormick.
Aye.
Dan Miller.
Aye.
George Montague.
Aye.
Beth Toso.
Aye.
Todd Schumann. Todd Schumann. Trina Stratton.
Aye.
Kirk Wan.
Aye.
Vice Chair Willie Bridges. Vice Chair Willie Bridges. Chair Jeff Strand.
Voting aye.
That's 21 ayes.
Thanks. Motion adopted. Quick review of our agenda. So we need to conclude the financial recommendations for net debt bonds. As you recall, at the last meeting, we established an ad hoc committee to take care of that recommendation work. We had John, Willie, Eric, Katie, Matt, and myself participating on that group. We need to complete the financial recommendations for enterprise funds, ditto on the ad hoc committee. Finalize any general comments or revisions to adopted comments based on the financial recommendations. We'll hear from staff on the timeline for the publication of the 2021 CLIC report and executive committee meeting with Mayor Fry. We'll have discuss our annual meeting to debrief, which would be a best practice, along with the social gathering. As chair, on behalf of the chair and vice chair, I'm proposing that we, during the off season, have 2 ad hoc committees. One committee on bylaws and policies and procedures. I would ask John Bernstein to convene, and it would be convened at the call of the executive committee. Secondly is a ad hoc committee on the equity training for CLIC for 2022. And I'd ask to have members who have expressed interest, Amity Foster and Katrina Stratton. And again, I'd have that, I would have Vice Chair Willie Bridges convene the meeting and have it at the call of the executive committee. So without further ado, moving to
Chair?
item 4.
Question, Chair. There's
Yes.
one outstanding general comment. Is there a space on the agenda for that?
There is number 6.
Okay.
So the concluding the financial recommendations for net debt bonds. So I believe John Bernstein will have a presentation and spreadsheet to make a resolution recommendation from the committee to wrap up the recommendations for net debt bond financial funding. John?
Thanks. Robert, just quick housekeeping here. I exited the meeting and rejoined to see if that would help. So I'm wondering if you need to redesignate me as a presenter one more time, and we'll see if it works. Otherwise, I'm just going to have to direct one of you guys.
Sure. And that's okay. We can bring it up. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at. Yeah, I'm not sure if we'll be able to do this using your current settings. I'm noticing that you've got the word guest following your name, and I'm wondering if that is if there's some.
Okay, I just got a notification. It says you're an attendee, won't be able to share content or facilitate.
All right.
Now try making me a presenter.
Sure. Okay, there we go.
Yep, now it says you can share content and facilitate the meeting. So I'm going to open this tray and see if anything's showing up. For some reason, nothing shows up in the share tray. I don't know why. So let's not waste time with this. Let's do, whoever on your side wants to pull up the spreadsheet, it's fine by me. I'll just, if you drive, I'll talk.
Sure, just 1 second. Okay, we've got it up on the screen here.
Perfect. Leave it right there for just a minute. Put my glasses on. So I'm going to try to be brief about this, but at the same time, I want to make sure everybody's on board with what we're doing here. So I'm going to give a little bit of context around this. You know, our value to the elected officials, we sort of have a 30,000-foot view of all of this. They have staff and lots of other people that have a much more detailed view than we have, and that's not what we're useful for, because that's not our, you know, the staff is the experts. So they really are looking for a 30,000-foot view from us. So I mention that because when we get into moving money around, that's getting a bit away from a 30,000-foot view. But the reality is we need to give them something that's reasonably balanced. In an effort to do that, it's possible that we're moving a project that just plain can't be moved for reasons we don't know about. And I guess the way I look at that personally is that's okay. We're advisory. They have the flexibility to shift things back a different way if that's what needs to happen because of some information we don't have. What's mostly important is that we give them a good 30,000-foot view, which is what the Click final report will do, and that we hand them something that's reasonably balanced. So I just give you that context. So if you see a project and you think, no, that's not the one to move, there's a problem, you know, there are probably several problems in here and they'll get that resolved. It's okay if this isn't perfect from that perspective. So with that context, if we start up at the very top, columns Z through AF, where it says over under total net debt bond funding at the very top of the page, I just want to refresh where we left off at the end of the last meeting. Those numbers, starting from 22, we were 10% over in 2022 and 2023. We were 9% underfunded in 2024, 20% underfunded in 2025, 16% over in 26, 45% over in 27, and 9% over for the 6 years. So focusing on the 6 years, we've got it moved from being 9% over to 2% over, which to the view of the committee is close enough for government work, for lack of a better way to put it. And for each individual year, we're well into single digits, with the near years being very close to zero and some of the out years being a little bit larger variance, which all of us think is close enough. So that I give you that context as kind of the starting point from where we ended the last meeting and where we've moved this to. So now I'll try to quickly show you what we did to make that happen. We'll start with getting it, the 6-year plan down from 9% over to 2% over. The only way to reduce the 6-year plan is to remove a project. Shifting projects around isn't going to reduce the total amount of spending. So we removed one project to make that happen. If you scroll down to paving, Robert, and once you get there, it's a project with a rating of about 159. Right there. So the changes we made are highlighted in red. So this is PV 179. We did this. The primary decision-making factor that we used was, do the numbers work? Not about specific projects being good or bad. So what's great about this one is it's reasonably close to our cutoff at 159.73. Our cutoff was 158. All of the funding is in 2027, the out year, and it's big dollars. So by cutting that one project, it takes this thing from being overfunded by 9% to being overfunded by 2%. This is a project that probably needs to happen, but if it needs to get delayed 1 year to get this to balance when it's out in 2027, that seems reasonable. So we're not picking on a particular project. This one just worked, and it worked well in the sense that it was also fairly close to the cutoff. So that's the reasoning behind that. Now, so from that gets this overall reasonably in balance. The rest of what we did was shifting funding around to get all of the years more in balance. So if you go up to the top, Robert, and just scroll down and look for red starting from the top, and I'll just briefly go through all of these. All right, so Northside Greenway. Again, if you look under where you see the red, that's the change that we made. If you want to see how we changed it, go over to the left to what they asked for. So they originally asked for the money for this project, $2 million in 2026. We shifted it to 2025 because that helped the numbers. We were severely underfunded. Remember, 20% underfunded at the start of this in 2025. Seems pretty non-controversial, right? People like this project. We put this project in. We're telling them to move it up a year, but it's still 3 years, 4 years away. So it's not like it's, going to cause them to have to do a bunch of things to make that happen. So that's the first one. The next, then scrolling down to these next few, Fire Station 11. We needed to get some numbers to balance. So we shifted $1 million out of 2023 into 2024. They still have $4 million in 2023 to get this going. Again, something has to move to get all this to happen. So that was, we tried to make smaller shifts to big projects to get the numbers to balance without having a major impact on the project itself and when it starts. Farmers Market, we did move out. It's in the near-term years. We got to get those numbers closer to zero. There's no way to do that without moving something. So we picked this one. They're getting the same amount of funding. We're just delaying it by 2 years, basically. Moving down from that, the 911, again, we shifted a relatively small amount. They were looking for 7.2 million to get this going in 2022. We took $1 million away and just delayed it by a couple of years. They're still getting 6.2 million to get this started next year. So the hope is that that's not going to have a major impact on them being able to get started, is the thought behind that. Keep scrolling down. This is the playground project. They had some big asks in the out years and smaller asks in 2024 and 2025. You can see that on the left. So we smoothed that out a bit because we were underfunded in 2024 and 2025. All of these projects I'm showing you, just as a reminder, we're not reducing or increasing their funding. We're simply changing the timing of it over the 6-year period and trying to do it in a way that's not going to have a huge impact on the project. Keep scrolling.
John, you may not see. Katie Jones has a question or comment.
Sorry. Go ahead, Katie.
I have a comment once you're done.
All right.
Okay.
Keep scrolling down. Just find the next, there we go. Again, Bryan Avenue South, we talked about this project. This project is going to get underway. So we've shifted a small amount relative to what's being asked for. We've taken $1 million out of 2022 and shifted it out to 2024. They still have over $10 million to get rolling on this project in 2022. It's hard to imagine that that's going to have any impact on what they're getting started. But again, if we've made a mistake, they'll shift it back. There's one project that we deliberately left alone that they could, and others where they can try to shift money around a different way if necessary. Keep scrolling. First Avenue North, we accelerated. They were asking for part of that money in 2025 and part in 2026. We moved it all to 2025. Keep scrolling. We already discussed this one project that got removed. This is another one, First Avenue North, where we've moved the money forward. So we took it out of 2026 and combined it and are putting it all into 2025 because that was that severely underfunded year. Sorry, so that's it for net debt bonds. So just go back up to the top for a second. We could have kept going and tried to balance out that 6% over in 2026 and the 6% under in 2025. But the reality is we're pretty close. And if they underspend in 1 year and overspend in the following year to perfectly offset that, I think that's probably better to leave it alone than keep making a bunch of changes that may create calendar problems that we're unaware of. So that's the proposal, and that's why it is exactly the way you see it there.
Okay, the proposal from John that John has expressed is presented by a ad hoc committee. Normally committees don't require a second, but we'll do the formality. John, you want to move that on behalf of the committee?
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it, Eric Wan.
Eric, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor, moved and seconded. Katie Jones.
Yeah, I just want to recognize, I mean, I think a lot of this makes a lot of sense, but so given that one project, 7th Avenue North, you know, just looking more at that project, I mean, I think it'd be good to write a comment to express kind of our rationale here, and that we don't necessarily think it's a bad project, and that we would encourage Public Works to bring it back next year.
I have no objection to that. I think that's fine. And I'm pretty sure I just heard you volunteer to author that.
Sure.
Okay. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Members need any more explanation? If not,
I'll just also say my name was included on that committee. I did not participate, and so I just want to say kudos to all of you who did do this work. So thank you.
Jeff, can I be recognized for a second?
yes, John.
I really encourage anybody, if you have any concerns or questions, to please ask them, because the one thing we're not trying to do is force something through that people aren't comfortable with. We're simply trying to get, we've been behind, you know, part of that is because we're working virtually and this is just hard to get all this done. And we're just trying to make sure we get finished on time, but we're not trying to slam something through that people don't like. So please speak up if you feel the need.
Not seeing anyone else, I'll take the liberty also of saying that I do think 7th Street North is an important project also as a North Sider, and it's an important connector from near north into downtown by the ballpark. But I think it's a great idea to have a comment and say that let's do the street, but we just can't do it in this 6-year CIP. Next we have Rich.
Yeah, I just want to say I had a chance to review this last night. I thought it looked great. My only question was about the issue that John already raised, the 6% from 2025 to 2026, whether that would be a problem. I think he addressed that. Everything else I thought looks both clean and sort of as little change as possible to get the job done. So thank you, John and team.
Next, recognizing George.
Yeah, I just like to echo that and kudos to you for working this and very clearly explaining it. And mine is more of a question than a comment, and it relates to the street funding because we are shifting money around quite a bit between the years. And how does that work? Is that within our purview to recommend that much of a variability or variance?
We've always done that. That's kind of, you know, because there's no other way to get to do this, right? If we have to give them something that's balanced year by year, it's virtually impossible to do that by simply putting a project in or taking a project out, because it's just that level of detail. We're forced to do some shifting around like this. Okay. So, and it's okay, right? We may be, there may be some stuff we've done and it simply won't work from the perspective of Public Works and staffing up for these projects, and they'll fix that. We're advisory.
Okay. Okay.
I would also say that for these projects, you know, they don't need $10 million all at once. They need to have the bonds issued at the time that they need to pay for things. So they don't necessarily, again, need it all at once.
Steve Brandt, next.
I just had a question. Maybe this is covered somewhere in the spreadsheet that I missed, but does this run afoul of either the street funding ordinance or the park funding ordinance in any significant way?
So that's with respect to park funding, the answer is no. And that's because we're funding everything they're asking for. And as we previously discussed, they very conveniently ask for exactly what they get, which is a problem that we need to comment on. Streets is a little bit less clear. There's some, from my perspective, it's not totally clear what the definition is of qualified funds. I believe that's changed over time. What Mike Kennedy in the Public Works Department presented to us about 4 or 5 years ago is different than what we're being told now. So if you look at those numbers there, it looks like we're well within the street funding ordinance, but those are including some things that at least some people in Public Works are saying should not be included. So it's somewhat up for debate. And interestingly, I went back and looked at the ordinance, and the ordinance does have language in it that says that they can look at and redefine what qualifies over time. So I think we should write a comment asking elected officials to get involved and make sure that this gets defined very clearly from the top down.
Robert Harrison next.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can echo a lot of the comments and just the importance of understanding, what this does in terms of streets funding. I wanted to comment on a couple of we see some red numbers up top on the over under for streets funding on the spreadsheet that's on the screen, 22 through 24, appear like they're under for streets funding versus 25 through 27, and they're a bit oversubscribed. I would just want to note that, for paving projects, the amount that was requested or 22 through 24 would have made it difficult for CLIC as a body to meet the street funding ordinance as it's been interpreted. And so that's not an unexpected number. And I don't think that there was much more that CLIC could have done, just given the projects that were requested to better fund streets, I would say, just at a high level. So Steve, I think it's a great question. And I can also comment, just at a very high level, and having had limited time to, I think, go through just looking at this, this does appear to utilize some of the more flexible funding sources that we have available for the CIP. And to echo John's comments, we're at $7 million, $7.8 million over on total net debt bond funding, which indicates that these bonds are, they are indeed being fully utilized in this CIP. So yeah, I just want to weigh in and echo and I think affirm what we're seeing here.
Steve. Back to Steve. No? Okay. I guess, John, I'll beg your forgiveness, but just to be completely transparent with the body, the committee did look at a project and decided not to move it. We thought that we were within the acceptable parameters. And I'm not mentioning this for anyone to suggest an amendment at this time, but just full transparency that we did look at PV 123 Logan Park Industrial, right, in terms of flip-flopping in years to try to be at a more perfect balance. But we recognize that we are an advisory body, and so the mayor and all the mayor's paid professional staff is going to look at this, and the council is going to look at it. So, we didn't expect that we were getting to complete perfection. John?
Robert, can you scroll to that project for a minute and I can explain to people why we didn't do that in a little bit more detail briefly?
Yep. Could you call out that project name one more time? Sorry, I was configuring something.
Yeah.
Logan Park.
PV 123.
Oh, whoop. Here we go.
There it is. So you can see over on the left that they're asking for 3.6 million in net debt bonds in 2026, and we're over by 3.3 million. So shifting that to 2025 would get things very closely balanced. The reason I didn't do that, or we didn't do that. It's twofold. One, every time we do this, we wonder whether we're messing up Public Works calendar, right? If we're putting too much into 2025 and they're not going to have the manpower to do it. If we leave it alone and there's a project that we've moved in, a different project that we've already moved into 2025 that in fact can't be done, by leaving this where it is, give them the flexibility to shift it over and shift the other one back and sort of send a message that, you know, underspending by 6% in one year and overspending by 6% in the following year is okay. That's, you know, the goal ought to be that over 6 years they're in balance. And I think, you know, allowing that flexibility is more realistic and just a better way to go about doing this kind of budgeting. So that's why we didn't move it and try to get things perfectly balanced.
Thanks, John. If we do not have any other questions or comments, then in the interest of time and completing our report today, not seeing any other hands raised, the clerk will call a roll on adoption of this recommendation from the ad hoc subcommittee.
I do.
Torbjorn Adam.
Aye.
Zachariah Hayden. Zachariah Hayden. Jonathan On. Jonathan On.
Aye.
Jocelyn Beard.
Aye.
John Bernstein.
Aye. I just want to say there's a lot of background noise. It's making it hard to hear the roll call.
Steve Brandt.
Aye.
James Brown. James Brown. Luke Cunningham.
Aye.
Scott Engel.
Aye.
Emily Foster. Emily Foster.
Aye.
Eamon Gallagher.
Aye.
Bill Graves.
Aye.
Kai Goodmanstead.
Aye.
William Gullickson. William Gullickson. Teresa Hustad.
Aye.
Katie Jones.
Aye.
Katie Jones. Excuse me. Matt Kazinka.
Aye.
Richard LaRoe.
Aye.
Erica Moucher.
Aye.
Dan McConnell. Dan McConnell. Jake McCormick.
Aye.
Dan Miller.
Aye.
George Montague.
Aye.
Beth Toso.
Aye.
Todd Schumann.
Aye.
Katrina Stratton.
Aye.
Eric Wan.
Aye.
Vice Chair Willie Bridges. Vice Chair Willie Bridges. Chair Jeff Strand.
Voting aye.
That's 24 ayes.
Motion adopted. We'll now move on to the, thank you. We'll move on to the financial recommendations for enterprise funds. So, John?
So Robert, can you just briefly pull up the pro forma from Public Works? I want to give a little context on this one as well before we dive into the spreadsheet.
Yeah, give me a second to pull the file up.
That's fine. I'll start talking while you're doing that. So without going into too much detail about this, Click has gone back and forth with Public Works about this pro forma. They used to provide it, then they stopped, and now they're providing it again. These pro formas, there's one for each enterprise fund: water, sanitary sewer, and stormwater sewer. What's important to know about these pro formas is, as I understand it, these pro formas presume that every project that they've requested of us will get funded. And so what these show is, with lots of assumptions about what water usage will be over the next 6 years, it shows what the anticipated impact on rates is over that 6-year period. So the reason this is important, the equivalent would be if we did the net debt bond funding without the city council giving us a net debt bond budget and having no idea what they want to spend. They give us a budget. So this is a little bit different. They don't give us a budget, but they show us what happens if they fund everything to rates. So that's the important thing to know about this. At the same time, what we don't want to do is get into a big commentary about what they should or shouldn't do with rates, just as we don't tell the city council what they ought to do with a net debt bond budget as it pertains to property tax increases. That's kind of out of our bailiwick. So it's a bit of a fine line. So having said that, could you now switch to the sheet that I sent out that shows the percent changes to the enterprise funds? Sorry, Robert. There. Oh, you're ready for me. Thanks. Can you blow that up a little bit for those of us with old man eyes and old lady eyes? All right, so this is the key that we kind of need to look at. So if you look at stormwater fund up at the top, you can see that those percent changes, basically 3% every year out 6 years. I'm speaking personally. To me, those are pretty reasonable. In my line of work, I spend a lot of time looking at things like inflation. My personal view is that inflation is likely to be well over 2%, maybe even more than that over the next 5 to 6 years. So in that context, those numbers don't look unreasonable to me. Sanitary, sewer, and water is a little bit different. I'll jump down to water. And so there's a fixed rate component, and then there's a variable rate component based on water usage. It's important to know that this committee, probably about 8 years ago, encouraged Public Works to shift more of the billing to the fixed rate piece from the variable rate, because at that time there was a real focus on water conservation. And when most of your revenues come from the usage of water, and you're telling people to conserve water, you're making your revenues go down, which is a good thing from a conservation perspective and not a good thing from trying to reinvest in the infrastructure. So by shifting more of the burden to fixed rate, they're able to encourage conservation without decreasing revenues quite as much. So I give you that context because you can see the $1 increase each year to fixed rates is a fairly high percentage increase, but it's something we've told them to do. By contrast, if you look at the variable rate where it says rate per billing unit, down towards the bottom under water fund, the increases are quite small, well under 1%. If you look at the total, those numbers are a little bit misleading because what they assume is that somebody only uses one billing unit. A billing unit is 100 cubic feet of water, which is about 750 gallons of water. I looked this up last night. At least a few years ago, the average household in Minneapolis, residential household, uses about 6,000 gallons of water a month. So I just did the math on this using a smaller number. So if someone had a bill where they used 5 units, billing units, that would equate to a little less than 4,000 gallons. So I'm not, I'm keeping the numbers low. If they had 5 units, that would be 5 times the $3, and let's look at 2026. So their bill would be $10.50 for the fixed rate component. I'm underwater. And then 5 units at $3.78 works out to a little under $19. If you blend that together, the $19 component only increased at 0.8%. The $10.50 component increased at 10.5%. But the blended rate is 4.3%, not 7.8. And the more water usage somebody has, the lower that percent increase is. So I just point that out, that these numbers are not as, these increases are not as big as they look like they are because the variable component, which is going to be much larger than 1 unit for most people, is a much smaller increase. So that's the context for what we're about to do with enterprise funds. Again, this is me talking personally. I view these rate increases as reasonable overall in that all of that context. And that's important in terms of what we choose to do in terms of funding. So with that, let's go to the enterprise funds. Steve, go ahead while we're waiting.
My question is simply whether we have done any further monitoring since we urged them to shift more to the fixed side to make sure that they're not unduly padding that. And whether the things they're putting on the fixed side really are things that qualify as fixed.
Well, I guess I don't know for sure, but I mean, those are just dollars that they're moving over there. You know, they're just shifting some of the burden that way. And I think the answer to your question is no. And I think we need to be careful that we don't get too much into the weeds on that. That's how we got into trouble with elected officials, and they stopped giving us this information about 8 years ago. And again, I just think it's a fine line. It's not really our job to get too much into rates. Telling them that they ought to shift the burden to variable is a little bit different than asking them for a bunch of detail about, you know, what's fixed and not fixed, and et cetera. Again, fine line, but I just think we need to be kind of careful about that. I think it's better to stick with, let's say that we thought these rates were unreasonable increases. Instead of telling them to lower rates, I think the better way to go about it is to pick a number, 80% of what they're asking for instead of 100% of what they're asking for. So again, I'm speaking personally when I say that it looks to me like these rate increases are reasonable. In that context, the proposal is that if you look at sanitary sewer to start, that we fund everything they've asked for. The lowest rated project is 183 points. As a reminder, our cutoff is 158. If 3% increases under sanitary sewer, it seems pretty reasonable to give them what they're asking for there. Then moving down to stormwater, if you could just scroll up a little bit, Robert. The same thing with stormwater. There is one that's close to the cutoff, but it makes it. And given the rate increases, it seems reasonable to give them what they're asking for. And then scrolling down to water. This one, personally, I could go either way on this. We could do the same thing and give them just what they're asking for. There's one project that misses by about 5 points. If they don't get that project, it's those dollar amounts aren't going to meaningfully change the rate increases. They will make them temper a little bit, but it's not going to be a whole lot, you know, in the context of the total amount that they're asking for. So I personally wouldn't have an objection if somebody wanted to make a motion to include this one. Softening plant chemicals is fairly important, and I know we have some CLIC members that can speak to the details of why more than I can. So I would I'd stop there. And, you know, the proposal is to fund sanitary every project, because every project made it. Same for stormwater and same for water. But as I said, open to an amendment to add in this one project that doesn't make our cutoff.
Katie Jones is recognized.
Yeah, so I will make that amendment. I mean, I think it's good so water softening prevents clogs and it keeps our pipes in better repair. So I think that's a good investment.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
So John has seconded. I want to speak to that as well. Willie isn't here, so I can't hand the gavel to him. The capital budget request says that the lime slakers are nearing the end of their serviceable life. They have 6 lime slakers, 4 of which are reaching the end of their serviceable life. And so as a longtime CLIC member and former Waterworks Citizen Advisory Committee member, Water Services has done a lot in their chemical treatment realm to move away, let's say, from large train tank cars that have to be moved across busy roads, trying to downsize on chemical handling, reduce the potential for a chemical release into our nearby community, Fridley. And so I am glad to see this amendment. Any other comments or questions?
Could we just see what that does for, I mean, is there totaling somewhere for water bonds?
Yeah, let me change these real quick and you'll be able to see the impact. So if I delete these out, you're looking at $7 million on water across the 6-year CIP. And including it, you see 169, of which it's a combination of water revenues that are going to be paid in the current year and water bonds repayable by water revenues.
Okay. Anything else on, so we have an amendment to a motion. I don't usually do this, but I'd like to make a motion to either have another amendment or amend the amendment. I think amend the amendment as deep as we can go. If you can scroll into the, I want to get into the fleet services area. And we don't have the pro forma on that, John. You just have the stormwater, sanitary sewer, and water fund.
Yeah, I was gonna take those separately, but if you want to do it as an amendment, that's fine. If you want to do it as an amendment, that's fine. And if you want me to speak to those before you do that, I can do that, or I can wait, whatever you want.
Oh, that'll be fine. I think it's more straightforward as you suggest. So I'll just step back for a second, and then we have the items that have been recommended so far, and then an amendment. So we should really, is there unanimous consent on adding the item that was suggested by the amendment that was seconded? If there's no objection, we will call the roll on the items proposed, along with the softening plant chemical system improvement water 32. Then we'll look at the other items in subsequent actions. I see no objection, so we'll have the clerk call the roll on the items recommended so far.
Thorbjorn Adam.
Aye.
Zachariah Aiden. Jonathan Ahn.
Aye.
Jocelyn Beard.
Aye.
John Bernstein.
Aye.
Steve Brandt.
Aye.
James Brown. Luke Cunningham.
Aye.
Scott Engel.
Aye.
Amity Foster.
Aye.
Eamon Gallagher.
Aye.
Bill Graves.
Aye.
Todd Gimnestead.
Aye.
William Gullickson. Risa Hustad.
Aye.
Katie Jones.
Aye.
Matt Kudzinka.
Aye.
Richard LaRoe.
Aye.
Erica Mauter.
Aye.
Dan McConnell. Jake McCormick.
Aye.
Dan Miller.
Aye.
George Montague.
Aye.
Beth Toso.
Aye.
Todd Schumann.
Aye.
Katrina Stratton.
Aye.
Eric Wan.
Aye.
Vice Chair Willie Bridges. Chair Jeff Strand.
Voting aye.
That's 24 ayes.
Great. That's adopted. John, we'll move on to the other enterprise funds.
So Robert, can you just scroll to where fleet and parking are, just above sanitary? All right, so these last two, there's a fleet enterprise fund and a parking enterprise fund. We don't have pro formas for them. These are much smaller amounts. With the exception of so if we use the same logic we just used, there's only one project we'd recommend. There's only one that meets our cutoff of 158, and that's the fuel and charging station. I'll make a couple of observations about that. I'm not going to make any motions. I'll leave that to others if they choose to do that. If you look at what's not being funded, most of it, speaking broadly, relates to cars that are fueled by fossil fuels, right? And that's a pretty unpopular thing these days. At the same time, you know, the reality is the city still has a fleet of fossil fuel cars that they're probably going to need for some period of time, and energy transitions can't take place overnight. And lots of us would like to see them do that as quickly as possible, but at the same time, you know, we can't, it's probably not wise to tell them to not invest in the things they need to maintain the fleet that they have. And similarly with parking. So that's one observation. And also, as it relates to fleet, the amount of money that's not being funded in those projects amounts to just under $400,000. So this is not a huge investment that they're asking for to maintain these things in the context of the, you know, hundreds of millions that we're dealing with here. And then I just make an observation about parking in general, this as it relates to what we do or don't do with cars and parking. I think there's risk of an equity issue here. There are elderly people that have mobility, limited mobility, and people of all ages that have handicaps that, for better or for worse, need to use cars. And so if we underinvest in that stuff too much, we may create an access and equity issue for those types of people. So I'll just stop there. I'm not making any motions. I'll leave that to others if they choose.
Recognizing Katie Jones.
Yeah, I'd actually like to make a motion to, and I'll explain my reasoning, to actually fund everything from Fleet 04 to Fleet 05. That's the way it's listed in my spreadsheet. And not fund Fleet 01. And my rationale is I understand that Fleet 01 technically made our cutoff. It was just on the edge there. But the rationale is, you know, we've put in a comment that kind of and for the second year in a row that chides Public Works for combining these two. And so I think it is contradictory for us to chide them while at the same time providing them funding. And the reason for funding the others is that they're basically equivalent in total dollars spent. So swapping out one for the others seems kind of like a fair trade.
John?
So I want to make a comment, but before I do that, I just
was there a second? I forgot.
I'll second it for
seconded. John.
I want to make a comment, but first I want to just clarify one thing with Katie first. Did you intentionally leave out Fleet 07?
Yes, I mean, I guess just because it was so far, it was even lower, but I guess it's only $50,000. So I guess include it.
Okay, so Fleet 07 is part of it. So my comment is, you know, I think you raise a fair point. I agree with you that they should break those out, and it's annoying that they haven't done it. I guess I don't have a huge objection to not funding it. I mean, basically what we're doing is calling their attention to it. They'll likely put it back in, which is fine, but it's our way of saying, let's listen up. You know, I think we may need to toughen up that comment more. I think we can do the same thing without not funding it, but I'm not going to object to that. Another option would be to cut the funding in half, which also would call their attention to it. Just one other point, we don't have anything to balance here. This is an enterprise fund, so we don't have to worry about taking something out if we put something in.
Steve Brandt next. Muted.
Steve, you're muted.
You're muted.
I just wondered if the chair could clarify the motion, which items are being added back in, and I understand which one is being taken out. I might want to massage it myself.
Yeah, the motion was to, as restated, was to remove funding from Fleet 01 and add funding for Fleet 04, 03, 02, 06, 05, 07, as I understand.
Great, thank you.
Robert, can you make that change? Add in 07 on the spreadsheet?
Okay, and then the chair wishes to speak. I want to thank the member for making the motion. I was going to do the same. I think not funding some of these items would really be penny wise and pound foolish. For example, not replacing hydraulic hoists that are at the end of their life service and potentially would be an environmental risk, I would think, from my understanding of hoists. Also, things like the tire balancing, a tiny expenditure that helps improve mileage and would save the city money in the long run. So I support the motion and would probably prefer partial funding for 01, but I'll support it as is. Steve and Katie.
Take mine down. I'll take it down.
Okay. Eric. You're muted.
A question regarding the comment that we did pass regarding fuel and charging. Does that need to be edited to in your view, to make sure that the connection between our action and their inaction is clear? That question for Katie.
Yeah, I need to pull it back up. And if anyone else has that handy, you're welcome to show it first.
While you're doing that, I would just say, I think we should add, it clearly does not have a line that says we didn't fund it because of this. And I think we ought to say something along those lines, make it very clear.
The comment relates to lead in the use of forward-thinking strategies and explore use of hydrogen stations to support new alternatively powered vehicles. Click requests that since gasoline and diesel infrastructure and electric vehicle chargers achieve and address city goals in different ways, fueling and charging projects should be treated as separate projects such that they can be scored appropriately.
Yeah, I think it would make sense to add in something at the end there about, you know, we have not funded this project because of our concern about being able to accurately score it. I'm happy to add that.
That can be taken as part of your motion, just so that other members who are new are familiar. We will ask the group to approve at the end of our process a sort of catch-all authorization to delegate authority to the executive committee to make sure that the report and recommendations are reconciled and make any scrivener changes and other detailed changes to make sure that the report is consistent. Do we have any other discussion on the motion at hand related to fleet? Seeing none, then as it's been stated and including the amendment to the adopted comment or the addition, the clerk can call a roll on that motion.
Bjorn Adam.
Aye.
Zachariah Aiden. Jonathan On.
Aye.
Gottfried Beard.
Aye.
John Bernstein.
Aye.
Steve Brandt.
Aye.
James Brown. Luke Cunningham.
Aye.
Scott Engel.
Aye.
Amity Foster.
Aye.
Eamon Gallagher.
Aye.
Bill Graves.
Aye.
Kai Goodmistad.
Aye.
William Gullickson. Risa Hustad.
Aye.
Katie Jones.
Aye.
Matt Kazinka.
Aye.
Richard LaRoe.
Aye.
Richard LaRoe. Oh, got it. Erica Moucher.
Aye.
Dan McConnell. Jake McCormick.
Aye.
Dan Miller.
Aye.
George Montague.
Aye.
Beth Koso,
Aye.
Todd Schumann,
Aye.
Katrina Stratton,
Aye.
Eric Vaughn,
Aye.
Vice Chair Billy Bridges, Chair Jeff Strand.
I vote aye.
That's 21 ayes.
Motion adopted. So moving on.
Chair Strand, your hand is up. Are you?
That is correct, Eric. I wish to speak and the vice chair is not here, so I thank everyone for your forbearance. I want to recognize on PK 004 off-street systems, I would like to move that CLIC recommend funding for the years 2022 and 2023 at the proposed level, even though this is the sole project in parking enterprise fund. Like to speak to it if there's a second.
Second, Katie.
Okay, thanks. So I'd like to speak to this. I'm urging members to put some funding into the off-street systems. The city has a significant investment in the off-street system. If we choose as a city and a society to move away completely, and I think we're moving that direction to electric vehicles and moving away from systems that are going to contribute to our issues with the climate crisis. However, we may not be able to stop on a dime, so to speak, and I think that it's not responsible as our committee to just ignore this large asset pool and potentially put the city into a problem such as it had several years ago when it ended up selling off a large quantity of ramps. That I think if we choose to make a statement about this, obviously the parking fund has taken a big hit during COVID. I had asked the finance staff if they could tell us what the contribution from parking to the general fund has been over the last 3 to 5 years. I maybe didn't have enough lead time. I suspect that it's in the $100 million range. I could be off, but I know there's a regular contribution that has been made. So that is why I would think this would be a responsible action. I'll recognize John and then Robert.
Yeah, I just speak in support of this, and actually I'm going to offer a friendly amendment at the end of my comments. Well, we'll see whether or not it's friendly or not. Again, this is unique, right? Most enterprise funds, you cannot divert dollars out of them, as I understand it. This one, they can move money to the general fund. I would also point out that even if you move to electric cars, you still need a place to park them. And to the extent that you make that more and more difficult, and the surrounding cities don't do that, that could have an impact that was not what was intended by the city. So there's that issue, and then there's the potential equity issue that I already spoke to. My friendly amendment would, if you consider it such, Jeff, would be to fund all years of this for those reasons.
Can we see what the other comments are from hands that were raised? So Robert and then Scott and Rich.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And I didn't have my hands up. I just started to weigh in. There's been a standing transfer out from the parking fund to the general fund of $7 million annually for at least the past several years. And that's been the general level that we've been transferring out to support general funded activities. There's some language in our city charter associating that spending with transportation related activities, I would say, at a very high level, but those certainly far exceed $7 million annually on the expenditure side. And so as you look at that transfer out, it is associated with certain transportation related expenditures, you could say, and those are far in excess of $7 million on the operating side.
We'll recognize Scott and then Rich and Katie and Steve.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I think that kind of information would be helpful to have put into the CBR for this. I kind of find this whole off-street parking thing to be silly, and I don't understand why the CLIC even deals with it, because we might as well just fully fund it all, because we don't have any information about what the implications would be if we didn't fully fund it. And we don't know, I don't even think they're telling us how much parking revenue came in, for example, last year. So they decreased their request for 2022 significantly. I'm assuming that's because the parking revenue came back down. So I don't know. Personally, I think maybe the city should be starting to move away from some of these ramps, particularly after COVID, when perhaps office use in the downtown will probably go down. But I'm not an expert, and I don't think anybody on this committee is an expert on parking use. So I guess I probably will vote against restoring all the funding, but I guess that's my point.
Thank you, Scott. Go to Rich and then Katie and then Steve.
Yeah, apologies. I'm asking for clarification on what we're talking about here. So this project was given a score 133 and therefore not funded. So that meant that we were not going to fund any of this. And now the discussion is to recover some or all of it?
Correct.
Okay. And if we do that, how does that affect the budgeting we just did to at the top to even out the years? We then have to go back to that and make further adjustments?
No, this is a separate enterprise fund, and I'll let our finance professionals speak to that if they will.
Okay. So it's
Robert?
a different pot of money. The funding
Correct.
for this is not net debt bonds, but other sources?
So just
Correct.
let me jump in and just mention and remind people of an enterprise fund. An enterprise fund, for lack of a better way to put it, is self-funding. This is not relying on net debt bonds. It relies on its own revenues that are collected from people parking. And typically with these enterprise funds, they pay directly with those revenues to make investments. And they also issue debt and pay the debt service with part of those revenues. And that's how they invest in the infrastructure.
Okay. So is there a reason not to fund all of these?
Well, if you fund everything, there's impacts on rates. You know, because they're raising revenues to do this, right? So if you, we know what those are with water, and to Scott's point, which I think is a good one, is we don't get pro formas on fleet and parking. We should probably get more forceful about asking those for future years because we're flying a bit blind without that information.
Understood. Thanks.
Let's see if Robert had a technical response first, and then we'll go to. So Scott still had your hand up, and then it'll be so Robert, Katie, and then Steve.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer just some additional perspective on the parking projects. There may be some CLIC members who remember from several cycles ago whether or not parking projects used to be considered as part of the CLIC process. I know that at least within recent memory, 2 or 3 years ago, parking projects were not necessarily submitted to the Capital Long Range Improvement Committee for consideration. It struck city finance staff as a bit odd, for lack of a better word, that these large capital projects were not going through the Capital Long Range Improvement Committee for consideration, especially given the fact that these are directly associated with transportation improvements. So they were brought back into the Capital Long Range, the CIP planning process 1 or 2 years ago for consideration by CLIC. It sounds like there's still some additional work to do in trying to figure out what the approach is to assessing these projects, to assessing whether they make sense for inclusion and recommendation by CLIC, and to consider what additional information would be helpful for the committee, and just kind of evaluating and understanding what these projects are, what those funding sources are, and whether or not to continue making recommendations around them. But that was the original idea, was these are large capital projects. They don't necessarily make sense to include in just an operating budget And so they were brought back to CLIC for additional consideration.
And
Thank you,
if I-
Robert.
If I could chime, if I could
Can we go
chime in real quickly,
Amelia?
the
Okay.
financial plans for the fleet fund as well as the parking fund are published annually with the budget. So we can drop that link in the chat, but there are the financial plans or pro formas essentially are available in the budget documents annually.
Okay. Moving on to Katie and Steve.
Yeah, first I had a question for you, Jeff. Why were you only including, what was it, 2 years of funding? What was your rationale?
I would take a friendly amendment that was offered to fund the entire program as recommended. It was a spirit that because of coming out of the pandemic, you know, we don't know what return to work is going to look like for the entire downtown Minneapolis workforce, for example. But
Okay.
I did not feel comfortable just cutting off the entire program, you know, like that.
Okay.
But
Thank you.
I would, if there's unanimous consent and no objection, take John's friendly amendment. I'm not hearing any, so we will do that.
Okay, so the amendment as it now stands funds the whole thing.
Yes.
Okay. My other thought was, I mean, especially given this conversation, and I know just kind of the, you know, the perspectives of many of this committee, I think something that could be helpful that we should maybe make a comment about it is for the city to understand what is the parking usage, especially coming out of the pandemic, and the opportunity to make sure that we're only making investments in certain garages, being strategic there, and could those, you know, garages be used for something else going forward? Like, you know, obviously we want to take a careful look here, but I think asking for that type of analysis on like parking demand could help them in their prioritization of their funding in any case.
I would consider that as a friendly amendment also, if there's no objection. Hearing none, it is. So let's go to Steve, and then we have Jonathan and Matt.
First of all, for those of you who are curious, I did post a profit and loss statement by parking ramp in the chat for anybody who's interested. There's historically been quite a range. The Vineland one over by where the Guthrie used to stand has been a dog. The city sold off some of its dogs several years ago, as was alluded to earlier. I fully understand the value of protecting assets, but and in ordinary times, I would not have trouble using parking revenues to support this. I am going to vote against this simply because I don't think supporting the full request, I think it's too risky until we know how much parking revenues are going to return to their historical levels, with perhaps people working from home and so on. So I'll be voting no.
Jonathan, and then Matt.
Yeah, thank you. I have one quick clarification question on the parking revenue. Does the parking revenue have to be used on maintaining capital structures for parking lots or parking garages, or can those revenue be used in other transportation funding on a general fund?
The latter.
The latter, so it doesn't have to go to parking. Yeah, especially if that's the case, I would like to echo some of the other sentiments that were expressed by other members, that we need more data and research on what the parking demand will be, especially in downtown garages as we start returning to work. And as we are recommending other programs in the transportation, trying to encourage people to not rely on parking and driving into downtown, I don't think this is the best use of recommendations on recommending restoring funding to this parking structure, especially we can direct those fundings onto other, encouraging other people to not use parking and not driving into downtown. So I would be leaning towards voting against this.
Recognizing Matt. Matt, are you? You need to unmute.
Thought I'd never be the one to do that. There we go. Yeah, it's a good conversation here. I think I'm feeling right now open to some near-term investments. You know, recognizing that there might be maintenance or other issues that would be critical to do soon. But I think, wary about fully funding the full 6-year rest. Because of the concerns raised already around, we know that this is just an area where demand and usage is going to shift, has shifted, and likely will continue to shift dramatically given the events of last year. And I think there is a part of me, you know, I don't know if this is the role of parking staff or policymakers, but I do feel a need for some type of policy and forward-thinking vision around what is the future of these ramps and how does it align with our goals around the climate emergency and around transportation mode shifts. You know, I don't support and I don't believe that there is going to be one day or a day in the soon future where we say, okay, suddenly there's no parking. This is always was and has to be a gradual drop of some sort, but I think we need to be planning for that, and I think our policies should be driving that. And you know, I would feel more comfortable making targeted, smart, strategic investments that are thinking about that future. So, for me, I think I would probably vote no on a proposal to fully fund the full request for the next 6 years, but I feel open to probably the earlier version of this that is more of a short-term investment and a request and a comment that we start to receive more of that information going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. I'm gonna go to Willie Bridges for a first-time comment, and then we'll go to John. So Willie first, then John.
Regarding this parking, we've had conversation about parking with the public. Also, parking have been this discussion. One of the things that's come up when we're talking about the parking downtown or parking anywhere, there are seniors going to be driving. Older people will be continually driving. We have to look at that too. Also, like, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. The county just said electric cars 50 years from now. I won't be around, that's for sure. 50 years from now. So they're looking at planning that far out. So it's like the balance. We have to look at the balance. There are folks who said, yeah, we need parking downtown. We need access, handicaps, and so forth and so on. So it's the balance. But this conversation was also with the public, and the public is saying, you know what, we need parking.
Okay, let's just do a check-in. John is next, and then Matt, do you have your hand up to speak again? Okay, and then Steve, do you have your hand up to speak again? So let's go to John and then Steve.
Thanks. I'll be really quick since I'm speaking for a second time. I just want to make 2 observations. For those of you that are concerned about funding the later years of this because it's unclear how behaviorally things may change, I think that's a fair concern. I think you could raise that concern for a lot of projects given COVID and other things that have happened. And I guess I would suggest that if we fund this in every year, that doesn't mean, I think a very important thing that we should do that Katie has suggested and as part of this motion is ask them for much better analysis about the current financials and also how they expect this to change over the years. Once we get that, if we see that there's shifting happening, there's nothing stopping us from reducing funding for these things, even in the years where we're already funding it now, once we have that information. And that holds true for any project and would be totally fair if we had new information that gave us a different picture.
Steve next.
Mr. Chair, would it be in order to offer a substitute amendment?
Substitute motion, sure.
Substitute motion, right.
Yeah.
I would move that we fund the off-street parking improvements at 2/3 of the recommended level for the first 2 years of the CIP, with the understanding that we will revisit each year and make adjustments as warranted.
Are you including the comment that Katie had suggested?
I'm not, yes, I would.
Okay. So funding at 2/3 recommended level in the first 2 years only, and then zeroing out the rest?
Right.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
Jonathan, second.
Okay, we have second. So we have a substitute motion, discussion on that, and just want to check the time is 1:24. I'm going to lower my hand, except we'll have, I just wanted to point out, as John had pointed out, that remember, members, that and I believe I'm correct, the first year will be appropriated, but the rest of the years are in a paper, they're on paper or electronic program. So completely changeable and not set in stone. So John, Eric, and Rich.
Really briefly, there was one other thing I wanted to say that I had forgotten at the time. I think it was Jonathan that said these funds should be redirected somewhere else. There are no funds to redirect somewhere else. They have to collect revenue before you can redirect anything. If this is if any infrastructure is underinvested in, well, let's just take parking garages, and they start to fall into disrepair, and drivers have a choice between parking in a private parking garage that's in nice shape or a city-owned one that's not in nice shape, they may choose the one that's in nicer shape, and there may be a decline in revenues that means there's less money in the future to divert to other things.
Eric and Rich.
Yeah, I just have a request, which is if whoever is going to be offering an amendment that we adopt, if they could include a comment regarding what our expectations are next year in terms of coming to us with some data, perhaps a plan for the next 5 or 10 years.
Okay. Rich?
I have a sort of a parallel to, I think, what John just said. I think if we decide to fund short-term years and leave off long-term years altogether, that sends the message we want to send. Partially funding the early years, I think, is a little bit too clumsy. So either fund or not fund, but partial funding, I think in this case would be impractical and does not add to the message.
Okay, let's go to Steve and then see if we should try to wrap this up.
My argument would be in response that it's sending the message that we should be cautious until we know how much annual revenue is going to be, and then we will revisit. I can't believe that the city is going to be any more penurious than private ramps in making investments in capital rehab.
Thanks, Steve. If we don't have any other comments, then we will have the clerk call the roll on the substitute, which is to fund the first 2 years at 2/3 recommended, include a comment, and no funding in the remaining years. So seeing no hands, the clerk will call the roll on the substitute.
Torbjorn Adam.
No.
Zachariah Aiden. Jonathan On.
Aye.
Jocelyn Beer.
Aye.
John Bernstein.
No.
Steve Brandt.
Aye.
James Brown. Luke Cunningham.
Aye.
Scott Engel.
Aye.
Amity Foster. Amity Foster.
Aye.
David Gallagher.
Aye.
Bill Graves.
Aye.
Kai Gudnestad.
Aye.
William Gullickson. Reese Hustad.
Aye.
Katie Jones.
Aye.
Matt Kazinka.
Aye.
Richard LaRoe.
No.
Erica Mauter.
No.
Dan McConnell. Jake McCormick.
Aye.
Dan Miller.
No.
George Montague.
Aye.
Beth Poso.
No.
Todd Schumann.
Aye.
Katrina Stratton.
Aye.
Eric Wan.
No.
Vice Chair Willie Bridges.
No.
Chair Jeff Strand.
I'll vote aye.
I have 17 ayes and 8 nays.
Motion adopted. Rich, you have your hand up?
I don't know if this is a point of order. I feel like conversation was abruptly ended as the pendulum swung in the other direction. I don't know how that's handled, if we expected everybody to vote no and then come back to it, or whether there was a consensus earlier on for more funding here.
I would just say that as chair, I did ask if there was any further comment, and there were no hands raised. There was no indication, so we just proceeded with calling the roll. And
Jeff,
no,
I raised my hand the instant you asked that, and there
Okay.
was no more than 2 seconds of time to entertain discussion or objections.
Okay, I guess I am seeing hands today. I didn't see that. John?
Well, just to clarify, I think what we just voted on was the substitute motion. There's now a substitute motion on the floor that is nothing's been passed yet. We're just now looking at the substitute motion as the motion on the floor. I'm not sure that's clear to the members.
And that is not clear.
Okay.
What did we just vote on?
We voted on the substitute motion. So we have a motion to do exactly what Steve Brandt proposed. So did you have further debate on that?
We didn't just vote to pass that substitute amendment?
No, you have to vote to substitute the amendment for the one that's on the floor. Then it's another vote to actually pass it. Nothing has passed yet.
So we have the motion on the floor then is to fund 2/3 of the recommended amount for the first 2 years. And maybe you can show that. So the 2022 recommendation was $2,075,000. The 2023 was $5,300,000. And no funding in subsequent years, which are not appropriated anyway. And then have a comment drafted for the report. So if there's further debate, let's, you have the floor, Rich.
I think I've made my point. The funding of the partial funding, I think, does not obtain any additional point. Fund it fully or don't fund it all. Since these are self-funded, not funding this sounds to me like Click is trying to make policy and saying, we as a Click have decided we don't like parking downtown, so we're going to do what we can to remove it. So be it. I think that's a bad decision.
Recognize Katie.
Yeah, I guess I don't see it as starkly as that. I think it does make some reasonable adjustments given the potential amount of revenue coming in that we're likely to not have strong amounts in these coming years. And that, I mean, I think to earlier points, if the body decides that we want to fund outline, from 24 to 27 onward, there are opportunities to fund those. And that, I mean, this body does prioritize where funding should go, and that is part of this. Whether we're putting it into parking, or we're putting into buildings, or we're putting it into bridges, that's what this body does.
Recognizing John.
Thanks. I would just say, to say the city wouldn't be that penurious on this, is a bit disingenuous, right? We're sitting here telling them underinvest. Well, I won't say it that way. We're advising them on how they should fund this, and it's us that's being that way, potentially here. They're asking for less in 2022 because I think they're uncertain about how revenues will come back. The rest of those years will have a chance to adjust in the future. So, voting no on the motion.
Are there any other comments? Any other discussion on the motion? Any other discussion? Not seeing any hands. Last call. Okay, now the clerk will call a roll on adoption of the substitute motion that has been discussed.
Thorbjorn Adam,
No.
Zachariah Aiden, Jonathan Ahn,
Aye.
Jocelyn Beard,
Aye.
John Bernstein,
No.
Steve Brandt,
Aye.
James Brown, Luke Cunningham,
Aye.
Scott Engel,
Aye.
Amity Foster,
Aye.
Eamon Gallagher,
Aye.
Bill Graves,
Aye.
Kai Goodnestad,
No.
William Gullickson, Risa Hustad,
Aye.
Katie Jones,
Aye.
Matt Kazinka,
Aye.
Richard LaRoe,
No.
Erica Mouter,
Aye.
Dan McConnell, Jake McCormick,
Aye.
Dan Miller,
No.
George Montague,
Aye.
Beth Koso,
No.
Todd Schumann,
Aye.
Katrina Stratton,
Aye.
Eric Wan,
Aye.
Vice Chair Willie Bridges,
Abstain.
Chair Jeff Strand.
I vote aye.
That's 18 ayes, 6 nays, and 1 abstention.
Okay, that motion is adopted. I think we're near a point unless there are any other actions on enterprise. So we're near a point. I'd like to I'm reluctant to take another roll call vote, but we normally just have a motion to close out the financial recommendations.
So moved. Bernstein.
So we have it moved, and is there a second?
Second, Willie Bridges.
Second, Willie, and then I'll recognize Katie.
Yeah, sorry, I have to go, and I just want to verify the 3 comments that I need to be making. So there's the charging / fueling station one. I think there were 2 more. Does anyone else have those written down?
Parking.
Parking? Or is it just the 2 of those?
And the executive committee members will be willing to help out.
Okay, I'll start those and send them out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. All right, we have, do we have any discussion? So what we're now doing is we're adopting all the recommendations we've made on net debt bonds and enterprise. So this is a final approval. If there's anything further, if this passes, then we need a motion to reconsider. So this is our final action. We're adopting the whole program of financial recommendations. Anyone have any questions or comments? Seeing none, last call, then we'll call a roll on the final adoption.
Thorbjorn Adam,
Aye.
Zachariah Aiden, Jonathan Ahn,
Aye.
Jocelyn Beard,
Aye.
John Bernstein,
Aye.
Steve Brandt,
Steve Brandt,
Aye.
James Brown, Luke Cunningham,
Aye.
Scott Engel,
Aye.
Amity Foster,
Aye.
Eamon Gallagher,
Aye.
Bill Graves,
Aye.
Kai Goodnestad,
Kai.
William Gullickson, Reese Hustad,
Aye.
Katie Jones,
She left.
Matt Kazinka,
Aye.
Richard LaRoe,
Aye.
Erica Mauter,
Aye.
Dan McConnell, Jake McCormick,
Aye.
Dan Miller,
Aye. Aye.
George Montague, George Montague,
Aye.
Beth Toso,
Aye.
Todd Seaman,
Aye.
Katrina Stratton,
Aye.
Eric Wan,
Aye.
Beverly Bridges,
Aye.
Chair Jeff Strand.
Aye.
That's 24 ayes.
Very good. Agenda item 7, final general comments or revisions to adopted comments. I think one member, Eric, did you have a final general comment?
Yes, I have one general comment in the queue, which is I'll just say remind the mayor and city council that we are here with respect to the major investments that are coming from the federal government. The last number I heard is a total of $2.7 trillion nationally, of which almost $1 trillion has already been spoken for transportation infrastructure. That leaves almost another, what is that, $1.7 trillion that will be distributed across the country for infrastructure spending. And I understand that this money, these funds will be likely available outside of our normal CLIC annual budget cycle. But I think it's necessary for us to state that this, just because it's outside of the budget cycle, does not mean that they should ignore the ordinance, which says to bring things to the CLIC for infrastructure. So that's the intention of the general comment that I've submitted here.
Thanks, Eric. Is there a second?
Second, Willie
Second
Bridges.
by Willie. So the clerk is scrolling it. Does anyone need to have it read? Anyone request that it be read so members can perhaps, it's fairly lengthy. It is scrolling. So I'm not hearing any requests. So let's see if there's any discussion. Do any members have discussion? And this would go in the report under general comments if it's adopted. Okay, I'm not seeing any hand raised. Anyone? Everybody had time to look at it. Last call. Not seeing any questions, then the clerk will please call the roll on adoption.
Torbjorn Adam,
Aye.
Zachariah Aiden, Jonathan Ahn,
Aye.
Jocelyn Beard,
Aye.
John Bernstein,
Aye.
Steve Brandt,
Aye.
James Brown, Luke Cunningham,
Aye.
Scott Engel,
Aye.
Amity Foster,
Aye.
Eamon Gallagher,
Aye.
Bill Graves,
Aye.
Kai Goodmanstad,
Aye.
William Gullickson, Reese Hustad,
Aye.
Katie Jones, Matt Kazinka,
Aye.
Richard LaRoe,
Aye.
Erica Mouter,
Aye.
Dan McConnell, Jake McCormick,
Aye.
Dan Miller,
Aye.
George Montague,
Aye.
Beth Toso,
Aye.
Todd Schumann,
Aye.
Katrina Stratton,
Aye.
Eric Wan,
Abstain?
Vice Chair Willie Bridges,
Aye.
Chair Jeff Strand.
I vote aye.
That's 23 ayes and 1 abstention.
That is adopted.
Jeff Scott.
I see Scott and Amity.
Yeah, I just had a very short comment that I requested close to 2 months ago information from Public Works and or CPED about Nicollet Avenue between basically 28th Street and Lake Street. And the reason why we haven't seen CBRs for either the reconstruction of Nicollet Avenue and or a bridge over the Midtown Greenway and have received no comment back. I am not planning to write a comment about it or propose one at this late date. I had hoped to write something expecting to get a response. I think other people that made requests got responses this year. I do plan in 2022 to write something. So just as an FYI.
Thank you, Scott. Amity?
Sure, thank you. I just would like to revise SWK 02 because we did shift funding. The original comment read, it's the sidewalk gaps. The original comment read, we are disappointed that funding for SWK 02 is being paused and underfunded in the current CIP. I would like to change that to, we are recommending that funding for SWK 02 be restored for 2022 through 2024 and stay ongoing from 2025 through 2027, and then strike the line that says CLIC urges the city to reinstate funding for this program with no delays.
All right. Is there a second?
Second by Bernstein.
Second, okay. So I will ask that you put the chat seemed like it was disabled a short time ago when I tried to see it, but if you could put the text into the chat for the clerk to record. Did anyone not capture the motion as stated to revise an adopted comment? I think because of the time, we'll forego with the motion to reconsider if there's no objection. Scott, do you have a discussion item? Okay, and Amity, you spoke to it, so then seeing no other hands, last call for comments. I will have the clerk call a roll.
Aye.
Zachariah Aiden, Jonathan Ahn,
Aye.
Jocelyn Beard,
Aye.
John Bernstein,
Aye.
Steve Brandt,
Aye.
James Brown, Luke Cunningham,
Aye.
Scott Engel,
Aye.
Amity Foster,
Aye.
Jamie Gallagher,
Aye.
Bill Graves,
Aye.
Kai Gudmestad,
Aye.
William Gullickson, Lisa Hustad,
Aye.
Katie Jones,
Left.
Matt Kazinka,
Aye.
Richard LaRoe,
Aye.
Erica Mouter,
Aye.
Dan McConnell, Jake McCormick,
Aye.
Dan Miller,
Aye.
George Montague,
Aye.
Beth Toso,
Aye.
Todd Schumann,
Aye.
Katrina Stratton,
Aye.
Eric Wan,
Aye.
Vice Chair Willie Bridges,
Aye.
Chair Jeff Strand.
Aye.
That's 24 ayes.
Motion adopted. At this time, I'll ask if one of our members will move the item that I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, sort of a catch-all resolution that the committee delegates to the executive committee to make final changes working with finance and property services to make sure that the CLIC report is consistent with the recommendations that have been fully adopted. You know, financial and comments have to be reconciled ahead of the final publication.
So moved, Brandt.
Is there a second?
Second, Erica Motter.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any questions? Members understand? John?
Just want to add some clarification to that, Jeff, because I'm not sure it's clear from the way you described it, that includes possibly adding one or two comments that were in last year's report that weren't possible to finalize until we had finished funding, specifically around, you know, how our funding recommendations line up with the Streets and Parks Ordinance. We get fairly specific with them about that.
Thanks for clarifying that. Yes. However, in general, there'd be nothing, you know, the executive committee is not going to change anything substantively that will change what the committee has recommended. Scrivener's errors, if there's anything inconsistent. So anyone have questions or concerns? It's a pretty routine motion that's been made over the past 20+ years. If there aren't any questions or further comments, then we'll have the clerk call the roll.
Thorbjorn Adam.
Aye.
Zachariah Aiden. Jonathan Ahn.
Aye.
Jocelyn Beer.
Aye.
John Bernstein.
Aye.
Steve Brandt.
Aye.
James Brown. Luke Cunningham.
Aye.
Scott Engel.
Aye.
Amity Foster.
Aye.
Eamon Gallagher.
Aye.
Bill Graves.
Aye.
Kai Goodnestad.
Aye.
Gillian Gullickson. Risa Hustad.
Aye.
Katie Jones is absent. Matt Kazinka.
Aye.
Richard LaRoe.
Aye.
Erica Mauter.
Aye.
Dan McConnell. Jake McCormick.
Aye.
Dan Miller.
Aye.
George Montague.
Aye.
Beth Toso.
Aye.
Todd Schumann.
Aye.
Katrina Stratton.
Aye.
Eric Wan.
Aye.
Vice Chair Willie Bridges.
Aye.
Chair Jeff Strand.
Aye.
That's 24 ayes.
Thank you. Motion adopted. Don't have anything else on item 6. We'll move to the timeline for the CLIC report. So Justin Carlson is working on the report, and the executive committee meeting will be scheduled with Mayor Fry. That, of course, will be virtual again. And so do we have a to be determined date at this point?
Yeah, Jeff, this is Robert. So we're anticipating completing the report. And Justin, correct me if I've got any of this wrong, but we're anticipating completing the report by Tuesday at the latest, I think, to kind of incorporate any changes that are coming from the CLIC executive committee, as well as any of the financial changes associated with the CLIC final recommendation. The mayor's meeting with the executive committee is probably going to occur sometime on or after the week of July 12th. Just looking at scheduling, we kind of held open the schedule in anticipation of the schedule sliding a little bit, depending on what work is looking like today. So,
very good. And concluding remarks and announcements. So I want to thank all the members for your diligent work again this year, working in the virtual environment. It's not easy. I'd call it steadfast work once again. I'm really privileged and honored to work with each and every CLIC member and the city staff. I see Eric has a comment. I just want to thank you all really sincerely from the bottom of my heart for this great work that you do for the city of Minneapolis and its residents. Eric?
Okay, I would like to add two things. One is call out to John Bernstein. John, this was a yeoman's job, making it technically work. And I know you've put many, many days and hours into it, and really appreciate your work on this. And finally, I'd like to thank Jeff Strand for leading us through this process. It's not easy, and the order that you keep really made these things go quickly and very efficiently. So thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Eric. We should also mention that I think a best practice would be for us to gather, I'll recognize John in a second, gather for a debrief. As a facilitator, I always would do that in facilitation sessions, you know, what worked well, what didn't work well, do betters, etc. And then also, of course, social gathering. And I think we have an entertainment director. Our food and beverage director retired, but maybe one of our members will pick up on that and we can have a, you know, for those who are interested, could do that. John?
Thanks, Jeff. I just want to recognize everybody's work on this. I mean, this is a group effort, and I strongly believe that the diversity of this group, in all senses of that, not just race, but just professional backgrounds, all of that and those different perspectives means that we end up with a better final product. And I just want to say, we have a lot of new members this year, and this was a tough year doing this virtually. It's tough when you're new. This is tough in person, let alone virtually. This is my 15th year. I actually still do remember my first year. We've done a lot to try to improve the process in terms of onboarding and orientation. Back when I joined 15 years ago, there was no orientation. You're just sort of thrown into the fire. And I think no matter what you do, there's a learning curve to this, and there's no way to get rid of that. So for those of you that feel like you were sort of 2 steps behind everything, that's pretty normal, especially in a virtual environment. And so I would encourage you to stick with it and get more vocal as you get more comfortable. Those of us that are more vocal aren't doing that to try to replace anybody else. Some of us are trying to provide that institutional memory that there's less of these days, just because the committee has had a lot of turnover. Everybody's input is valued and is important for all of us to end up with a better final product. And thank you to everybody.
Vice Chair Willie?
And, you know, I think this year with the new staff and everyone's adjusting to different things. And as John, Jeff, and Erica said, it's a learning process. I still remember, like John, I remember the first year, it takes a while just to figure out the scoring and adjusting. And when they do the presentation, that's a lot to comprehend. But like with the new folks, as John and Jeff had said, we've tried to do the orientation because we did not, John and I, and we did not have an orientation. And we had these people who had been around who were teachers in some sense. And with a new staff this year, that's new for the staff, putting all this together. And it's a teamwork. And with my involvement, this is for the good of the city. You know, it's not just our neighborhood, it's the community good of the city, addressing some of the diversity, lack of in different community. That's important too. There's a lot of work to be done. We've got next year to be together as a team, and we have to work together as a team and look at what is the good of the whole. What communities are we not serving? What communities need more to engage? We still have to figure out, how do we get the community engaged when we have those meetings out in the community? Maybe next year we can be there in person in the communities, but I think that's an important piece that still has to be worked on. And as you go out and prepare for next year, ask your community to be at some of those meetings. It's really important that we hear the people that we represent. we hear their voices.
Thank you, Willie. I want to echo anyone who arrived late that I did at the start of the meeting mention that without objection, I had said we would have 2 ad hoc subcommittees that the vice chair and I would be calling for. And so the bylaws and policies and procedures, and the second being equity and dealing with the strategic and racial equity city plan and doing some enhanced training with CLIC. And I apologize, I have a work meeting at 2, so unless there's anything further, I'm gonna have to wrap up at 1:59. So with that, we've completed all the items on our agenda for this meeting. I will ask members and staff if there are any other matters to come before this meeting. John, I see you have your hand raised.
The most important issue of all, we need to designate a social director.
Yes.
In the absence of anybody else, I'll do it. But if somebody wants to step up, please go ahead.
Thanks, John.
Me, I'll be the social director. That's what I do the best.
Okay.
Katrina.
Okay. Okay, doke. So we'll look forward to hearing from both of you. If not, without objection, I'll declare the meeting adjourned, and the regular session of the CLIC committee for 2021 is hereby adjourned. Thank you, everyone, and have a great summer. Have a great, safe holiday weekend.
Everybody.
Bye now.
Thank you all.